Hello, I'm Vian, a Vietnamese Australian organisational psychologist, and I want to talk about talking to your Asian parents about mental health. Of course, I speak from my lived experience as a Vietnamese Australian talking to my refugee parents who came to Australia as teenagers, but similar themes can be for other migrant families whose parents came from a different culture. And regardless of where your family is from and the cultural background, just talking to your parents, period, can be difficult, let alone touching the topic of mental health. And for me as a psychologist, after undertaking 7 years of study, because some of it was part-time as well, my family knew that I was undertaking this study for at least 7 years, and it was still a struggle. And after that period of becoming a psychologist, it remained a struggle to talk about mental health topics. So you probably have a good idea of why it would be difficult to talk to your parents. Again, there's that generational gap, and if you're from a migrant or immigrant family, there's the chance that your parents were exposed to intense trauma leading to having to escape their home country, or they've had the experience of completely starting again in a new country. And for the diaspora children that just grew up in a completely different setting to our parents, there are so many differences in how we were raised already. This is such a common theme that comes up in the client sessions that I have, and I have so much experience on this topic too that I want to talk through some elements. So the question is, how do we talk to our parents about mental health? Or taking a step down, how do we just have better communication with our parents? And you might be watching this as a teenager, or if you're like me, an adult. You've been an adult for a while, but maybe the communication with your parents isn't smooth or adult-like. Perhaps they still kind of see you in that child kind of view. So regardless of whether you live together, whether you live in a different town, state, or country, the treatment might be the same. As one example of not really being seen as the kind of adult or grown up yet, whenever the whole family gets together to kind of make spring rolls as the group activity, I still haven't graduated from just peeling the sheets, the wrapper yet. I've not graduated to the putting the filling in and wrapping it up yet. So I'm very much still in that kind of kid category in my family. So here are some steps you can take to have a look at your communication. Firstly, let's analyze what is the current state of play with the communication with your parents. Is it quite transactional? Do you have deeper conversations? What are the questions that you ask when you first see each other? Is it, have you eaten? How was your day? I used to be guilty of that very obvious, have you just come home? Yes. So what can you note about the current level and type of communication that you have? And then the next part, phase 2, is what do you know about your parents that informs their communication style and preferences? What have you observed about how they talk to their parents and how they talk to other people around them? You know, are they quite harsh with you but really lovely and sweet with their friends? Or is the way that they talk to you quite consistent with how they talk to other people in their life? It can be quite illuminating when you start to dive into like what has shaped your parents. And I know I've had discussions where when I talk to that next generation, for example, a Chinese Australian mother who's in her 50s, she has mentioned that she's never hugged her mum before, never hugged her parents. Actually, she didn't really make eye contact with her parents as that sign of respect. And so that was her base, and in her family, they didn't really hug as much. And then after you've done a bit of an assessment of the current state of play, the history of your parents, and if you still have the willingness that you want to improve your communication styles, what's one thing you can trial and do differently? And there is a whole bunch of suggestions here. So I've mentioned before that you could watch a TV show together. Personally, I'm a fan of watching K-dramas together and using that as a springboard for talking about different topics. You could bring your parent to a sports game and see how they find it. See what they have to say, see what if they've been in that kind of atmosphere before. Or maybe you've identified something that you normally do and you want to stop the cycle and do something differently yourself. So here's an example of all these steps in play. My starting point with my mum is that we had that kind of typical mother-daughter relationship where you're close, but there's so much conflict and disagreements and every conversation would inevitably lead to some kind of argument. Got pretty good at stepping away from the argument or just seeing it as normal. It was a pretty enduring pattern of wanting to be close, sometimes being close, and then having lots of conflict. And it took a period of intense family conflict, so you can't really avoid seeing that the situation is not good, that there's kind of daggers flying in all directions, where that made me stop and see the situation. Was at that point, every conversation or interaction was negative, tense, and dismissive. Despite all the conflict, and because I was living at home with my family, there were still pockets where we did spend time together. So with my mum, it could be car rides, going grocery shopping together, errands, that kind of thing. And when I paused to think about what is my mum's style or what has informed this, I realized that she is the type to say everything on her mind, and when she's let it all out, that's when she can stop talking about an issue. Whereas the pattern in the past was that she would talk it all out, I would interrupt her. And so she never really got the chance to say everything that was on her mind. And in analysing that kind of communication pattern, I saw that was my mum's style, and for me, I'm very particular about language. So I would argue and interrupt if there was a certain word that I disagreed with, or, oh, you don't get it, why are you using that word to describe me, and all those kinds of things. So the thing that I tried to do differently was just be quiet, let her finish everything that's on her mind and see where that goes. And I even remember the first time that I tried that, and it was mind-blowing, just letting her say everything that was on her mind, not interrupting her, not getting hung up on the small word choices like I normally do, but it finally allowed me to understand her a little bit more and start to tip the scale towards some more positive interactions rather than just 100% negative like it was before. So there's a lot more story time to come, but hopefully that's something to keep in mind. See how you think about it. Maybe you want to try it for yourself and let me know how it works in your family. Thanks.